One night back in 2021, I was woken up at 5 a.m. to a group of guys trying to get into my flat. Both the front door and the back door handles were rattling at the same time, and I could hear at least a group of 3 men who were shouting to try and get in. And as you can imagine, as a single woman living alone, I jolted out of bed. I started ringing the police. I was literally shaking, imagining the worst case scenario in my head, and I was just begging them. I was like, please, please come as fast as possible. And around 10 minutes later, the police showed up and the guys just disappeared. They just decided to leave, and obviously I'll never be able to truly understand what happened, but the only logical explanation I can come to is that it was a Friday night, it was 5 a.m, and so I imagine they were drunk, and maybe they thought that my flat was theirs, hence why they were screaming to get in, because if it was a robbery, they would have been quiet, but I don't know, I'll never find out. But anyway, this incident totally triggered my anxiety, and I was terrified. And to give you some context as to why it hit me so hard, when I was one, my family got burgled whilst we were all asleep in the house. They took so much. They took my mom's wedding ring, and the next day the police actually found them, and they said to my parents that we were so lucky we didn't wake up during the night, because if we did, they probably would have put a hammer through our heads. And so obviously that's so reassuring, right? And so my mom, being a new parent, decided that she wasn't going to let me sleep alone because she was scared that what if that happened again or something worse happened. And I'm a baby, right? I don't remember this incident, but from a young age I started to develop severe sleeping problems, and I started to get anxiety at night time, and this became a long-term issue throughout my whole childhood. We even moved my bed into my parents' room because I was just too scared to sleep alone. And eventually, when I hit around 10 years old, this issue really started to break down my relationship with my parents, because they didn't want me in their room anymore. They were getting so angry at me, but I was just so scared and fearful, and I didn't understand why. And night after night we would end up in like full-blown screaming matches at like 1 a.m, and this went on for months and months. And as a kid it was incredibly painful. There was a lot of anger, hurt and confusion. Now you might be wondering, why am I telling you this? But just stay with me, it's gonna come full circle. Fast forward to my teenage years, I end up living in a psychiatric hospital, which is a whole different other story, but because I was surrounded by staff constantly, this sleeping problem wasn't as prominent at night. It didn't bother me as much through my teenage years because I was constantly around people. But eventually, when I turned 20 years old, I was about to live in my first ever apartment alone, and that meant that I was going to have to confront this big fear of sleeping alone. And so in order to help me at first, the doctor put me on strong sleeping tablets, and these tablets are only meant to be prescribed for like 2 weeks because they can be addictive, but he let me be on them for 3 months. And they honestly knocked me out every single night, which is what I needed in order to be able to make that transition and learn how to sleep by myself. And finally, at the end of 3 months, I just started to feel like I can live alone. I had just started to think, okay, nothing bad is going to happen to me. Maybe I am safe. And then this incident happens with the guys trying to get into my flat. And so now you understand that not only was I scared because these guys were trying to get into my flat, but this triggered all of my fear and childhood trauma that I had been through. And it really set me off. My anxiety went through the roof. I started to become paranoid. I was like, are they going to come back? Are they targeting me? Are they going to come back with more people? My mind was wrapped in its own tangent of fear. And the next day after the incident, I was super unsettled and anxious, and I was already worrying about how I was going to sleep that night. And my mom says to me, Heather, do you want me to stay over with you to make sure you're okay and just see that things are safe and you'll be okay? And honestly, in that moment, I wanted nothing more than to just be like wrapped up in this bubble of safety. I just wanted to be wrapped in this blanket and not to feel any fear, not to feel scared that someone was going to come and harm me and that everything would be okay. But I thought back to my childhood and how I had been totally controlled by anxiety and fear. I thought about all of the arguments with my parents and how there had been so much pain and anger. I thought about how I had been on those sleeping tablets for 3 months and all of the hard work I had done so far to get to where I was. And so even though I literally felt petrified that these guys might come back, I said to my mom, no, I just need to be alone and I need to get through tonight, whatever happens. Because I knew if I gave into this fear and I let it get its grip on me, I could have easily gone back down the route of depending on other people again, not being able to live independently, not being able to live the life that I want. And so the following night, I was honestly petrified and paranoid, but eventually I did fall asleep, and then I instinctively woke up at 5 a.m. on the dot, and my heart was pounding out of my chest. I had to really calm myself down and remind myself that I'm safe. And literally every single night for around 6 weeks after that incident happened, I woke up at 5 a.m. with my heart pounding out of my chest. But I just kept on persisting because I knew that I couldn't let this fear control me again. I did not want to go back to the life that I had before. And eventually, because I kept persisting and I sat with that uncomfortable emotion and I let it pass through me every single night, finally the fear started to decrease again and I started to realize that I'm okay. And now, after many years, that childhood fear is gone. It's not something that bothers me anymore. I don't have any sleeping issues or anxiety anymore at night time. And so why am I sharing all of this with you? Well, although you may not be able to relate to my exact story, I'm sure you can relate to the feeling of fear, right? Or the experience of feeling like life is constantly knocking you down. It's constantly throwing things at you, like you're being tested over and over again, and maybe you feel like giving up. And I remember once hearing a phrase from Tony Robbins, and he said, if you want to succeed in life, you have to be willing to take relentless action. Not just action, but relentless action. And he was specifically talking about business in this scenario, but actually I think this applies to every single area of our lives. If you want to succeed, and when I talk about succeed, I'm specifically talking about overcoming like an adversity or overcoming a problem or overcoming a certain area of your life. If you want to succeed in a certain area, you have to be willing to take relentless action. Relentless action is this mindset of, I will not give up. It's this mindset of, I don't care what is thrown at me, but I'm going to persist every time. You get slapped in the face, you stand back up. You get slapped in the face, you stand back up. It's this mindset where deep inside, you know you are not going to stop until you succeed. The truth is, a lot of people, when they hit a few obstacles, they give up. For example, maybe someone is trying to get fitter and healthier and they're trying to make this new lifestyle work, but it doesn't work for them and they get frustrated and they're struggling and eventually they throw in the towel and say it's not for them. They're a failure. Or maybe they keep getting rejected by every single job offer and they keep trying and trying, but it's always thrown back in their face, and in the end they're like, this isn't for me. It's not possible. I'm a failure. And something I've learned throughout my life is that the difference between people who succeed and people who don't is that the people who succeed fail just as many times as these people, but yet they still get back up and they keep going. That's literally the only difference. I honestly used to live under the illusion that there was just a special group of people who were just born to succeed and they had something that I didn't. I just thought that I was a failure and I couldn't make a change, and then I realized that that's simply not true. Most people who have achieved amazing things are not special, they're just relentless. They've failed so many times. They keep getting knocked down again and again, but the difference is that they get back up. They kept taking action no matter how hard it got, and that's why they succeeded. And in that moment when my mom said, Heather, do you want me to stay round? Because I was terrified of those guys coming back. I honestly wanted nothing more but to just feel safe. But I knew that I had to be persistent and I had to keep moving forward. And it's the same with any other area of my life that I've overcome. For example, I used to suffer with extreme social anxiety. And I honestly can't even tell you how many times I would go up and speak to people and I would feel sick and I would be stuttering and I would be awkward. And it felt like I made a fool out of myself and I'd be embarrassed and I would come home and maybe I would cry and I'd feel ashamed. And then I'd get back up and take action again. Because honestly, in my head, I didn't give myself an option to quit. I didn't see giving up as an option because living with social anxiety was not a life I wanted to live. It was this way or no way. And so no matter what happened, no matter how many awkward conversations or how many times things went wrong, I just kept taking relentless action until I cured my social anxiety. And so all of this story is to share that if you have fallen recently, or maybe you feel doubtful that things can't change, don't give up. You have to get back up again and be relentless. Don't give yourself an option out. You have to want it so bad that you're not going to let anything or anybody stop you, because life is going to test you. It's going to poke you. It's going to drag you down. And every single time you have to be willing to get back up. If you want to succeed, you have to take relentless action. And so I hope this story could speak to someone out there. I felt called to share it this week, and all the best to you going forward.